Great. I think we've filled up the session nice and quickly. Thank you all for being so prompt. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Net Zero Communities Forum with Western Power Distribution. My name's Kai Hoare. I'm a project manager at Regen. We're a mission-led organisation looking to transform our energy system for a net zero future. And we're really pleased to be bringing you this session this afternoon. As I've been saying, because we've got so many of you on the call, there's not enough time for everyone to introduce themselves over the video. So if you could all just use the chat function, introduce yourself in that, tell us where you're joining from, what the weather's like, and then if you could all also rename yourselves with your full name and organisation, that'd be really handy so we can see where everyone's coming from and what, and if you've got any questions, we can follow up with you on that as well. Just some housekeeping to begin with. So as George has mentioned in an email to you all, this session is being recorded and we will be sending the slides around after the session as well. So there's no need to furiously scribble everything you see on the screen this afternoon. Do sort of interact with the chat function throughout the afternoon, ask any questions you want to in that. And also for our speakers, if you want to use the raise hand function to ask a question over video at any time, we can get to you, and that's fine. But do use that chat function to interact throughout the afternoon. Firstly, I'm going to just ask the Regen and WPD teams to introduce themselves before we make a start. So Prina.
Hi everyone, my name is Prina. I'm a local energy coordinator here at Regen, and I'm going to be with Al's in the Networks and Partnerships breakout later.
Great, thanks Prina. George.
Hi everyone, I'm George. I'm a graduate intern within the communities team, and I'm going to be with Kate in the energy efficiency and fuel poverty breakout room later on.
Great, thanks George. Ollie.
Afternoon everyone. Ollie Franklin, Senior Project Manager at Regen, looking at EVs and innovation, EVs innovation, sorry that was. And I'll be in the low carbon transport workshop later on.
Great, thanks Ollie. Hannah.
Hi all, Hannah. So I'm the events manager here at Regen. So I'm just going to be making sure that everything is running slick in the background, making sure that you're all going into the breakout groups that you're all meant to be. In order to help me do that, I have one quick request in that, can I please ask you each to rename yourselves with your first and last name? You all gave an idea of which great breakout group you'd like to be in today. In order for me to put you in that right breakout group, I need to know who you are. So I'm hoping that that'll all make sense. Thank you.
Great, thanks Hannah. Next up, I'll go to Faithful.
Hello everyone, my name is Faithful Sanda, now called Community Energy Development Engineer, being the first at the moment, pioneering the role. So my duty today is to try and speak to you about what we're doing in the community energy space.
Great, thanks Faithful. Paul?
Yeah, good afternoon everybody. Paul Jewell from Western Power. I'm System Development Manager, and a lot of my area is to do with carbon reduction for connections and community energy. As Faithful said, he is the first of our community energy engineers. I describe him as our prototype. And if our business plan gets funded the way we hope Ofgem will fund it, we're going to have 4 Faithfuls, one in each area. But this is all part of working with you guys and finding out what it is you want from us as we support community energy. And the breakout group I'm going to be in is the low carbon transport one a bit later on. Nice to see you all.
Great, thanks Paul. Eleanor.
Hi everybody, I'm Ellie from Western Power Distribution. I work in the stakeholder engagement team and also in the social obligations, doing the sort of fuel poverty and priority services register work. So I will be in the fuel poverty and energy efficiency breakout room.
Great, thanks Ellie. And finally, I'll go to Mark.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Mears, WPD. I'm currently the Green Recovery Project Manager, so trying to deliver our commitment on green recovery. So happy to answer any questions later on that you might have.
Great, thanks Mark. Well, we've got a really sort of packed agenda this afternoon. So Prina, we could just flash up the agenda. Thanks. So firstly, we're gonna hear from Faithful, who, as he mentioned, is WPD's new community engineer, and he's going to speak to us just about the support that the program support that they've got for community energy, both this year and in their next business planning period going out to 2028. And then you've got a chance to ask Faithful, Paul, and anyone else in the WPD team any questions on that or any queries that you have for them. And then very excitingly, we've got our breakout sessions. So these are on topics that you've told us that you want to hear about. And we've got some great community energy experts to help us guide the discussion in each of them. So we've got Kate from Tamar Energy Community, who will be in the energy efficiency and fuel poverty breakout session. Mary from Energy Local on local supply. We've got Als from Devon Energy Collective in the partnerships and networks breakout. And we've got AD from Charge My Street in low carbon transport. So it's really a good chance for you to ask those people any questions you've got on those topics, and really sort of interact as much as possible out there for you to get out of them what you want to, and get that sort of expert insight and advice. So yeah, we're really looking forward to them. Do interact and speak as much as possible in those sessions. And then we'll have a quick 5-minute tea break, just a bit of time away from the screen so we can all get a refreshment before we come back. And then we're really looking forward to having Andy and Jess from Bristol Energy Coop, who are going to be presenting on some of their really exciting and quite innovative local energy projects, and talking about how they measure the impact they have, and top tips for other communities that want to follow suit in those successful community energy projects. Then to wrap up, we're going to hear from Mark, who's WPD's Green Recovery Project Manager, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what WPD have got planned for their next business planning period in terms of how they're going to reinforce the network, which is a really key topic for anyone looking to connect a generation project onto the grid. And he's also going to just cover how the Green Recovery Scheme's gone, which has looked at sort of strategic network investment. Before I wrap up, and then we're really keen to get your feedback at the end of the session, because that's really important. That you give us that feedback, because it helps us plan future sessions and know what topics you want to discuss and what you want to cover. Because these sessions, they're for you, and they're for this session this afternoon is for all community energy organisations and other local energy stakeholders who want to sort of work to achieve net zero in their communities and work with DNOs like WPD to help bring about the local energy projects that can achieve that. So we're really pleased that we're able to bring you sort of expert advice and insight as part of that. And it's really the chance for you to ask all the questions you need to. So please do, throughout the afternoon, interact as much as possible. Use the chat function when we're in the main session, but then use those breakouts as a chance to ask the questions that you want to. And we're really pleased to be bringing you this session this afternoon. I think in the sort of current context that we're dealing with, it's such a vital time for the net zero agenda, and particularly our idea of a just transition. When we're looking at the energy price rises that we are and the cost of living crisis, I think the work that community energy does has never been more important, really, to make sure that no one's left behind in the energy transition. Which is why we're really glad to see that WPD are renewing their support for community energy, and they're putting on sessions like these and helping facilitating them, so you can all learn from each other and develop those projects. So on that note, I'll pass over to Faithful, who's just going to summarise what support WPD has for community energy moving forward.
Thanks, Guy, and thanks again, everyone. This afternoon, I'll speak to you about the kind of support that WPD is or hopes to offer to the community. And before I do that, I thought I should start by giving you just a brief, I suppose, introduction of who WPD are, just for the sake of those that might hear WPD either for the first time or they don't know how we operate. Can I have the second slide, please? So WPD is a distribution network operator. These days, people tend to call it a distribution system operator for other reasons that I won't go in. So we operate the local electricity network, distributing power to about 8 million customers, and that is homes and businesses. We cover predominantly the East Midlands, West Midlands, Southwest, and this South Wales. So we've got quite a large area that we cover that includes cables, poles, and towers, as well as transformers. If I can have the next slide, please. And as I said, I think this is more or less repetitive. This is probably just showing how power flows from the generator to any business. If I can have the next one, please. So what do we do? So predominantly we keep the lights on. That means we operate our network efficiently and all our assets efficiently, and then we maintain the equipment so that the network remains reliable. We fix the network when things get damaged or they get faulty. And then we also connect customers either by upgrading existing networks or building new ones. And we operate a smart network, meaning that we manage the system regardless of how the power is flowing, as well as adding flexibility services. Next slide, please. So WPD has a vision, it has a purpose, and it has an approach that it wants to use when working with community energy groups. So our vision for local and for community and local energy is for it to be strong, resilient, and form part of the energy sector. And then that way we will be able to achieve net zero and ensuring that fairness is achieved at all levels of society, including the vulnerable ones. So we know that community energy organizations face multiple barriers, including lack of viable business models. Time is a problem, resources can be scarce. And so we endeavor to ensure that we engage with them so that we stay informed about the complex and fast-changing, the ever-changing landscape in our energy system. Can I have the next one, please? So we recognize that the playing field is obviously not level. Some people are way ahead of others. And so in terms of what we are doing, we are trying to make sure that we provide additional support to communities and all local energy collaborators working either on the climate emergency or local energy plans. And either way, the idea is to ensure that we get up to net zero. So since 2014, we've been working with Region, of which Kai is a member, and they have independently facilitated events, conferences, and we engage with them on an ongoing basis. So we have focused largely on making sure that groups connect projects to the network, and whenever we can identify an innovation opportunity, we always want to ensure that it is something that we can help. I'm sure some of you could probably know me from the time when I was working as an innovation engineer. And so these are some of the things that I was heavily involved in. Can I have the next slide, please? So why is it important that we support community energy groups in our areas? So we know that community energy organizations provide value beyond just the power they generate. To a large part, they are trusted by their local communities because they work in their best interest and have the local knowledge of the large demand groups, potential sites, or any new projects that are emerging. And then they are also in a position to identify which projects could be successful within their communities. So community energy groups obviously are able to build local networks. They know where the vulnerable customers are. They engage on a wide scale, bringing people together and so on. And those of you that have been talking to me for some time might probably have seen that I've visited you in your areas as well. Next slide, please. So in addition, we recognize that community energy groups are placed in a much better position because they're able to educate and encourage behavioral change, such as maybe demand reduction, time shifting, and the uptake of new tariffs. So community energy groups are obviously skilled at bringing together investment, and they are also good at sourcing for funding from a range of areas, whether it's private or community shares. So as far as WPD is concerned, we recognize that we can use them as a link to communicate the complex energy issues, either on an expert basis or on a non-expert basis. And then we know that community energy groups do tend to collaborate with local authorities, either on climate emergencies. They work with local stakeholder groups, all this aimed at delivering net zero. Next slide. So as WPD, we've got commitments that we've set up. And of course, as Paul said in the introduction, in our business plan, we recognize that community energy groups are important, and community energy as an entity is an important function. That's why we are committed to accelerating net zero in the communities across all the 4 license areas. We know that community energy organizations play a vital role in achieving the net zero transition. Without them, we will not be able to do that. Next slide, please. So what are we doing then? So we are working with Region, who we believe are experts in community energy. And so using the pool of resources that they have, we'll be able to work them to engage with community and local energy stakeholders. You can see today we've got in the region of about 90 participants in this seminar. That is just due to the good work of Region. So we also recognize that on a day-to-day basis, there are new community energy groups that are emerging, either small businesses or local authorities that want to connect generation to our system, such as EVs, heat pumps, and all the rest of that. So we also know that there's work to do around developing all these different aspects of community energy to our system. And so we are working very hard to develop and bring together a new team of community energy engineers and advisors. And that is all set out in our business plan for 2023 to 2028. Can I have another one, please? So our support for energy, community and local energy stockholders is growing. We are helping groups across the 4 license areas to support and provide access as well in order to meet their local energy goals. To date, we have appointed one community energy engineer, who is myself, a prototype, just to see how things go. We hold in-person and online net zero communities forums for stakeholders. We do publish a range of resources on our website, such as the community energy, stakeholder brochures and things. We're going forward, and we've done this before. We also identify opportunities for innovation, which we can partner with community energy organizations. And then through projects that we've done, such as OpenLV, we support communities to access data through that way. Next slide, please. So we are also in a position to provide more information on network connection costs, network reinforcement costs for communities through our website, surgeries and forums. And then we also help to identify funding opportunities through the community energy engineer, which is myself, and newsletters. And then we have, in our business plan, made a commitment to connect at least 30 community-owned generation projects to our network per calendar year. And then in addition to that, we have also set aside a 1 million Community Matters Fund to support communities across our 4 license areas. And then obviously, to find out more about what I've discussed with you, what I've shared with you, we've got that website there. and then my email address is on there as well. My mobile number is there together with my office number. Over to you, Kai.
Great, thanks for that, Faithful. Prina, we could just take the slides down for a sec. Yeah, thank you, Faithful. That was a really handy overview, and from our point of view, great to see how, yeah, what the role of the community energy engineer is, and how WPD are planning to take on more of them. I think it's something that we've and other community energy groups have been calling for quite a number of years, to have that dedicated resource for community energy and a point of contact in the DNO. So I think that's really great to see. Hopefully there's a number of you on the call that have already had the chance to speak to Faithful one-on-one, but as he mentioned, his contact details are there if you're keen to reach out to him, and we will be sending these slides out so you can get them after the session as well. But now we've got a couple of minutes in our agenda before we go into the breakouts, really for any of you to ask if you've got any questions for Faithful or the rest of the WPD team on anything he's just covered. If you want to use the Zoom raise hand function, and I'll get to you if anyone's got any questions. Cara, go on.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a bit of internet issues. I just wondered, I've put it in the chat as well, but I'm engaged with a community energy project where there are grid constraints. We've got funding that's obviously got limited time to spend in order to bring that project forward. So I just wondered what opportunities there are where there are these grid constraint problems that we could work with WPD to bring forward some of that work that is scheduled later on to happen more quickly. Otherwise, quite a few projects aren't able to happen. It'd be a real shame to have to give that funding back. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Cara. Paul, or maybe Mark, would you be able to just speak to that about how those network reinforcements could be brought forward?
Yeah, happy to do that, Cara. I don't think we can just get rid of the network reinforcements because they're there, and certainly the role of the community energy engineer isn't to sort of get over that in a financial sense, but what we are there is to put you in touch with the engineers that understand those constraints. So if there is things that we can do on a local level, we'll make sure you've got those contacts. We'll make sure you're asking the sort of questions that, quite frankly, big developers ask us all the time. And I think that's the sort of help that we want to allow the community energy engineers to do, is to put you on that same sort of level playing field that some of the bigger operators are on. As for bringing reinforcements forward, there's a couple of things on that. The first thing is that our strategy and forecasting team do put out an annual summary of where we believe energy is going. So if you do have information on planned community energy stuff, tell us, because then that can go in the plan and that can create our reinforcement plan. And the other bit of, I think, good news, certainly for demand customers, but maybe semi-good news for generation customers, is Ofgem's review into the way that we charge for things is hopefully going to report next month, and I'm expecting that it will remove reinforcement charges from demand connections and remove them at the same voltage level for generation connections as from April 2023. And that might not work for some of your early funding, but that, I think, is a glimmer of hope for the future.
Yeah,
great, thanks Paul. Yeah, I think that's something we're also hoping to see from that Ofgem review, as shallower connections, so the generators can more affordably connect to the network, because that's definitely been a barrier for communities. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question, Cara. Gordon, did you have a question on the specific role of the community energy engineer?
Yes, and several questions actually. I'll put them in the chat as well. But could we have, in conjunction either with a community engineer or more generally with WPD, a workshop for the capacity mapping tool? Because where reinforcement is needed, I found the best way to try and optimize the use of the existing grid, but working quite hard to get information from WPD in our area in the Welsh Marches. Some people excellent in the local offices, some people not so aware of it at all. So quite hard to therefore get the information needed. So I think in general, across all of our groups, making maximum use of the capacity mapping would be really useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a session we could definitely do. Yeah, specifically on that capacity mapping, if that was something that would help you out. Yeah, myself and Faithful could do that. Kate.
Hi, Kate Royston, Tamar Energy Community. I saw a comment in the chat about OpenLV, and I think that's something worth kind of mentioning. And we were an OpenLV pilot, but over the last kind of couple of years, we haven't really been able to do anything with it. And I think that given the situation we're in and the need to really encourage people to try and avoid using power in peak times, etc., we should really see whether or not, well, it would be helpful to see how the people that were pilots are using it and whether or not there's any benefit in expanding it, because it was a really valuable project.
Great, thanks, Kate. I know that is something that we've looked to pick up, and it's something that WPD included in their community energy strategy. Faithful, do you want to just pick up on that, and if you've been able to find out what the sort of progress is for rolling out OpenLV?
Yeah. So in terms of OpenLV as a project, I've spoken to the people that were directly involved with it, and as far as I understand it, they have made some submissions for, I suppose, further work to be carried out on that. And I think the findings are there, but I think it's just a case of what sort of information the information is there. It is just a case of accessing it and using it for one's purpose.
Yeah, thanks, Faithful. And just for anyone who's unaware, OpenLV was an innovation project that WPD did, which gave communities access to local electricity substation data. And as Kate mentioned, Tamar Energy Community were one of the pilot communities in that, but there were a few others around their license areas as well. So yeah, it gave communities access to that substation data, so they could see energy use at their local substation. And yes, Mike, we will avoid acronyms as much as possible, or define them where we need to. Tony, you had a question.
Yes, so Tony McNally from the Heart of England Community Energy Solar Farm, Stratford-on-Avon, which you're very welcome to visit on your next trip there. But I'm also Managing Director of Climate Change Solutions, and springing from our experience of the Heart of England, where we have 55,000 solar panels, we successfully over 4 years proved the benefit, and we're starting to try to spread this benefit for the whole of the West Midlands. And we started with Coventry doing a solar mapping of the large south-facing flat roofs in the city, and this demonstrates the possibility of something like 1 million solar panels in Coventry, and just starting in Birmingham. If you combine that, that's about 3 million equivalent. If the West Midlands, it would be 12 million. I would like to ask, is there anybody working on the potential for a solar procurement organisation that would make it, with economy of scale, much cheaper for community projects and possibly others to buy in at a cheaper rate and extend really the scope of more community energy projects?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point, Tony. It might be one that we'll have to pick up in the breakout sessions, or we can follow up on that if anyone's got any thoughts for Tony on that sort of organisation. Do get in touch with him. But yeah, that might have to be one that we just pick up a little bit later. We are going to go into the breakout session soon, so I'll take one more question before we do that. So Chris, if you can make your question brief.
Sorry. Thank you, Kai. I was going to give way to Gordon, so I'm sure he's got a lot more to say about Tony's question, but we could talk quietly. I had a slightly different question. We're talking about reinforcement of an existing distribution architecture. What work, if any, is being done by WPD to think about different ways of actually architecting and structuring their local networks at low voltage levels? This seems to me to be a fundamental problem. As long as you're going to have to continue to add technology and engineering in the same way as you've done effectively for the last 100 years, it's going to be very difficult to make progress. This is much more of a challenge than something seeking for an answer, but it's an observation that I think needs making.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
See, I should have waited to see what your answer was, Faith. So it might be better than mine.
I'll take all answers. Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely doing a lot more to make use of the existing capacity that's in the network. So we no longer build, if you like, to a maximum demand network. We actually look at energy flows and two-way energy flows on the network. That works really well on the higher voltage networks, but when we get down to the low voltage network, which sort of runs down the pavement outside your house, there isn't a lot of spare capacity and there aren't that very many alternative routes. So when we get to that network, I think our job in the next few price reviews will be digging up streets, laying cable and conventional reinforcement. But the main message, Chris, is that if you look at where decarbonisation takes us, we're going to have about 4 times the amount of electrical energy being moved across our network than we have at the moment. We're not going to build a network that's 4 times as big because we haven't got the time, the money, or the resource. Well, so we will be operating it more flexibly.
I mean, you're quite right, Paul. I fully understand all the efficiency and balancing and efficient use of infrastructure. My point is slightly different, and it does pertain locally. My reading is that you regard the installation of infrastructure as something that maybe has a 50 or 100-year life.
Yeah.
It's not something you put in and then can take out and put somewhere else. And that seems to me to be a fundamental error. If you're trying to provide rapid reinforcement to support local community schemes, you want some kit in some form that you can ship in quickly, use for 2 or 3 years, and then move on somewhere else. So the whole economics of the thing changes, and it's that I'm trying to get at.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, we haven't got a lot of that, in fairness, Chris. So we'll write that down as something to do. But the other point is also useful, that because we do operate a network that's got a 50 or 60-year life, we're in a position now that whenever we do anything on the network, we build it big. A sort of a Bristol Brunellian type engineering approach rather than a build it just big enough and hope for the best approach.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Paul and Chris. Okay, so if anyone's got any more questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat. But now it's time for our breakout sessions. So Hannah is going to, in a second, magically put everyone into the breakout session that hopefully you selected when you signed up. And then we've got about 40 minutes in those sessions. So it's, as I said, it's the chance for you to ask all the questions that you want to, really interact as much as possible, and hear from our community energy experts. So we'll see you back in the main session at 3:15. Hi again, everyone. I hope you all got what you wanted to out of those breakout sessions and managed to get answers to all your questions that you wanted to. Hopefully had some good recommendations for WPD in there as well on what you want to see from them. But now we're just going to take a quick 5-minute tea break, give you all a chance to get a refreshment before we'll be hearing from Andy and Jess from Bristol Energy Co-op. So if you could all be back at your desks, ready to go for 3:20. Thanks. Hi again, everyone. When you're all back at your desks and ready for the rest of the session, if I could just ask everyone to turn the cameras on so I know who's back and who isn't, before I hand over to Andy and Jess. Hope you all managed to get a nice cup of tea. Had time to anyway. And to Steve, who asked the question in the chat, we'll be putting the recording of the sessions and hopefully all the breakouts on our website in the next few days. So just keep an eye out for that. Great. Well, it looks like we've got most of it back. Thanks everyone for coming back so promptly. And Prina, if we could just get the slides up again. So now I'm delighted to hand over to Andy and Jess from Bristol Energy Co-op, who are going to talk about some of their latest projects, the impact those have had, and the sort of community energy business models. So yeah, Andy and Jess.
Hello, I'm Jess Skitcham from Bristol Energy Co-op. Andy, do you want to give a hello?
Hi everybody, I'm Andy O'Brien. I'm a co-founder and director of Bristol Energy Co-op.
Cool. So as Kai says, we're going to be talking a bit about our history, our structure, the type of projects we've worked on, and we'll be covering some of the top tips based on challenges that we faced towards the end. Okay, so let's get started. Next slide. Yeah. So we were established in 2011, and it was volunteer run back then. But now, you know, we've been scaling up over the years, and we're now looking to recruit more and more staff. We've got 5 employees at the moment, but a couple of new roles on the near horizon. And then we also have a board of 8 voluntary directors. So we meet once a month with them, and we look to our board for, you know, plenty of different skills and different opinions. Say, from our perspective, and probably elsewhere as well, you'll feel the same way, but diversity is key in a board, and that's diversity in every sense of the word, whilst all of us being, you know, united and engaged in our mission. Our structure is that we're a community benefit society. So we are governed by our primary rules, which is effectively our constitution, and they protect our structure now and in the long term as well, and they're visible on our website, so really transparent. And we have over 1,200 members. So all of our members are investors in our cooperative, and that's from a mix of community share and bond offers over the years. But we have a minimum investment of £100, so we try to make it accessible for people. And that's our mission statement there. So yeah, next slide, please. This is sort of an overall view of how the business model works. And on the funding side of things, about half of our funding, of which we've raised 14 million since 2011, half of it's come from individual investors through our community share and bond offers. And then the rest is, you know, yeah, various different loans, grants, things like that. And then we raise the funds, we install green technologies, and I'll get onto more of this later. And then generating electricity means that we create revenues, and some of those surplus revenues get channeled into community projects, which deliver our community benefit. Aside from that, a core thread of what we do is our collaboration, which I'll touch upon more on later, but using our influence and expertise and our networks to create greater change for the energy transition. So because we know what we're doing is a win-win, but we need national, local government, private business, everybody to recognise, support it and get involved. Thank you. Next slide. So this is a sort of overview of what we've delivered to date, and it is quite a solar heavy portfolio, which has worked well for us so far. You'll see from the sort of numbers there at the bottom that rooftop solar, so we've got 13 rooftop solar projects in Bristol, and they are generating 0.5 gigawatt hours per year, which is, you know, relatively small compared to our 2 solar farms. So the solar farms we've got are in Lawrence, Weston and Puriton in Somerset. So, you know, the generation is a lot lower with the rooftop solar, but they deliver a really high community impact because it's helping. Generally, we work with community centres, and we do favour those sorts of businesses because it gives them a benefit, cheaper bills, and helps them to deliver on their services. We're very open to working with commercial businesses, and so some of our projects are those as well. Yeah, and aside from that, we've also got a grid servicing battery storage at a housing site. Yeah, and I'll explain a bit more about the projects in the pipeline further down the road as well. To give a sense of our size and scale, I know not all of our energy generation is happening in Bristol itself, but using our data that we've got, we generate the equivalent of 33% of Bristol's solar energy and just over 7% of the total renewable energy generation in Bristol. So that's solar, wind and hydro. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. This is sort of gone into a separate slide. This is kind of a project that's basically about to be delivered, but and so should go into the previous work. But Microgrids is a really exciting piece of work that we've been doing in the last few years. So the Microgrid Foundry is a joint venture. We have a stake in that, but it's also got the involvement of Wolverton Community Energy, Chelwood Community Energy, and CPRO, who are a private organisation and basically the brains behind it all. So these microgrid schemes, as it says there, they are new housing schemes, and Water Lilies, which is in Lawrence Weston, just out on the northwest side of Bristol, is the first of these. And residents there get, they're going to be moving in later this year. They will be getting most of their energy from on-site generation, from solar panels on the roofs, which are all connected up. They can top up from the grid when needed, and they will be exporting any excess energy to the grid as well. But there's no fossil fuel on site. And these technologies, they've been done in housing, but not to this scale necessarily. And the internet connectivity between the solar generation, the storage, and the way that the energy is used on site is quite innovative. So there's some really smart tech that's going to be going on behind all of this. And we're aiming to sort of use this scheme as use the data from it to understand how the buildings work, and use that to demonstrate the benefits of this approach to help change the mindset of house builders. So in terms of our involvement as Bristol Energy Cooperative, we specifically funded the solar PV, the grid servicing battery and the microgrid elements of the project. And we're generating revenues from it through on-site electricity sales and from grid balancing services as well. And as you'll see just from the next slide now, we have another microgrid scheme going on, which is in Bridport co-housing. So it's a larger scheme, it's 53 homes as opposed to 33 on the other one. And co-housing is an affordable housing development, and it's really exciting. And people might ask, oh, it's not in Bristol, but with this sort of, microgrid scheme, it's a bit unusual. You need to have the skills and the knowledge of how to do this. So it's the aim of the Microgrid Foundry is really to have this model that hopefully will extend across the country. So we're not just sort of looking too locally for this. In terms of other schemes going on, there's still a lot of solar coming up. We've got a Bristol Beacon project. I was just going to touch upon this because it's a nice example of how community energy can be a real win. So the Bristol Beacon was previously known as Colston Hall. It's a big music venue in Bristol undergoing huge renovation. The building's owned by Bristol City Council, and we're going to be providing electricity to the Bristol Music Trust who are inside the building. And originally the site was consented for 30 kilowatts of solar, but we saw an opportunity to deliver much more. And being a community energy partner, we can justify a much longer payback term than perhaps private installers can do. And so we're actually going to be installing 4 times what was originally planned for, which is really exciting. It's making the most of those rooftops. And we're in partnership with Wilmot Dixon for this, who are a really engaged contractor and willing to speak to community energy groups. So, we're hoping maybe there'll be more projects further down the line as well. Aside from that, we've got 8 other projects with a strong community focus. So that's community centres, care homes, nurseries, sports clubs. But aside from the solar, we are trying to diversify our portfolio. We've been working, I don't know if you've been following us at all, you might have seen our hydropower scheme that is going on the River Avon. So this is progressing along really nicely. And part of the reason this has been viable is through European grant funding. It's taken a huge amount of work, and we were lucky enough to have a skilled volunteer working with us on this project who's since joined us on the team. But yeah, sometimes it's right time, right place, and having the expertise there to help along with the project. And we've also got a grid servicing battery project going on right now, although the contracts are still being drawn up, so we can't discuss that too much. Next slide, please. Being a community benefit organisation, of course, it's really important that we are bringing that, explaining how we deliver on that. And the first and foremost benefit that people will see is actually from the host buildings. As I mentioned, we're opting for community projects very often, host sites that have a community interest. This is a sort of very, it's a big underestimate, but there's at least 20,000 annually saved from those host buildings collectively on their energy bills, and that will only be going up, of course. And aside from that, we've put a certain amount of our surplus revenues into a community benefit fund. So ours is called the Megawatt Community Energy Fund, and another community energy group, Low Carbon Gordano, also put money into that, which really helps offer greater grants to community organisations in Bristol. So they can access grants of about £4,000 from that. And it was set up with Quartet, who are a local community foundation. And speaking to Quartet, they say that the reason why community groups in Bristol really like it is that they know it's a reliable funding stream for them. It's been going since 2017. So having that set fund is a really great work for groups to access funding, and it's specifically for sustainability projects. So that's how we manage a lot of our community benefit, but we do also give, we have given donations and delivered on community impact in other ways as well. Thanks, next slide. As I mentioned, another central work stream for us is our collaboration element. So we've talked about the Microgrid Foundry, but another big one is our work with Zero West. So Bristol Energy Coop was a founder member of this organisation, and the idea here is that it's bringing together all the experts, change makers on a regional level, for across the commercial sector, the community sector, and the West of England local authorities. So I've just been in the breakout room all about partnerships. I mean, this is absolutely key in pushing things forward at a greater level. And in these groups, it's not just talking about energy. I mean, we talk about heating, transport, the built environment. There's different topics that will be brought upon, and it all, you might say this all feels very labour intensive, but collaborating on a regional and national level with these different parties, it helps to deliver larger projects, and actually it also opens up doors in terms of funding revenues. You find out about things through collaborations. So this is one way to justify it, is that it could actually bring about projects and funding streams that you weren't previously aware of. And then, of course, it also delivers a much larger impact in terms of what you can do, rather than just working alone. So, we really believe that collaboration is really important for the community energy group. And on that, in terms of nuggets of top tips, Andy, who's been in it from the very beginning, has more to say on that.
Okay, thanks so much, Jess. Yeah, so we've been going, 10 years, and I have to say it's been a bumpy ride. There are lots of other groups on the call who've been around about the same time as us, longer maybe. I think we'd all say it's been a bumpy ride, and it hasn't been followed. We haven't just followed a plan, it's been reactive sometimes, rather than depending on what's happening in the policy environment. So that's not going to change. What's happening right now, that the whole thing is up in the air, so it's very difficult to sort of have a fixed model to work from right now. I think it's all about being able to change the way you're doing things, but also build on all those networks that you have built up and collaborate, because if you don't do, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, we have done some reasonably big schemes, but we want to do a hell of a lot more. We'd love to be doing whole street retrofit, the Energy Sprong type project, but it doesn't work right now. It'll only really work when we work with partners at scale, at a regional level, and we start bringing in the institutional investment and the impact investment that's out there, but isn't yet flowing down to community energy. You know, it's going to big companies developing stuff, but it's not going to community energy. So that's what we're really keen to do, help push that all forward, so that once that happens and we've got a model, that can be rolled out across the country. What I've just put up here is just some, I suppose, some top tips, just sort of based on experience over the last 10 years. If you are starting out as a new group yourselves, these are some things that helped for us and hopefully could help for you. A lot of them aren't particularly special to community energy projects. I suppose it's, if you're doing any project, it helps to follow some of these things. So first top tip, commit. You know, when we started, there was no social media, there were no Zoom calls. But it was only when we decided to actually physically meet on a monthly basis each week, each month, regardless of what was happening, did we actually start getting some momentum and start to solidify our dreams into some sort of plan. So yeah, commit, and then start with something achievable. You know, we started with rooftop solar because it was a technology we understood, the public understood, and there were other people doing share offers in a similar way. So it was a model we could copy. Share the load, got to, if you want to avoid the burnout. So sort of map out the skills that your team needs, and then you know, really do spend the time looking around for people who can take on those different roles. And that's where, again, those networks help. And you are an asset to lots of other people. So, you know, we work with various councils in the area, and, you know, councils are hugely short of resource, staff resource. So they may actually have, say, assets that you could install on, but they may not have the time to really work through the detail of this. Whereas you, as a volunteer group, may have more time, and you've got access to funding through crowdfunding, or sorry, fundraising. So if you can link up with your sustainability officers and start an ongoing relationship, that can be really useful. In the same way, big law firms, financial firms, they have regional offices, and their staff are now really quite keen, we find, to work with us in various ways. They may potentially join your board, or they may do some pro bono work, or they may host meetings at their offices. There's lots of things going on there. Okay, next slide, please. We've chased lots of grants in the past. We've had a few, but we've spent a lot of time not getting them. So if you were trying to raise maybe 5,000, just almost like to get your group up and running, what I'd really do is consider just a crowdfund, where you're just asking people to donate and telling your story, because amazing things happen when you do crowdfunds. Yes, you get some money, you may well reach your financial total, but also people come forward with offers of help in various ways. And yeah, it's just fantastic to see what happens out of those events when you sort of put yourself out there and things happen as a result. Do be prepared for bumps in the road. You know, the number of times we've come across what seemed like showstoppers, but in the end didn't turn out to be showstoppers. You know, that's unfortunately just the way it is. Just be patient, just accept that things are going to take much longer than you really think they should do. Then I put, an asset is not just for Christmas. You can spend years and years getting your first project over the line, and then suddenly you've got to think, hang on, who's going to look after this long term? And so, yeah, try and build that in. And the nice thing is now that you're not alone on this. You know, there is lots of help out there now, with an increasing number of community support organisations who only support community groups like yourselves setting up with something, and they can help you with lots of different stages in the process. So on the next slide, please. I've just listed there some of the organisations that I'm aware of. You know, we've worked with quite a few of these over the years, and certainly when we started up, we got support from Co-ops UK. We've had some initial funding from Power to Change. We've used pure leapfrogs free legal templates that have got a whole suite of documents you can use. We've learnt huge amounts of stuff from Regen and Community Energy England. We work with the regional energy hubs who now rebranding as net zero hubs, and there is quite a lot of funding there. And we're in a constant dialogue with them to say, don't just fund capital projects, but fund staff time. So we'll get more staff actually working on this on a full-time basis. And then if you want organizations who actually can pretty much take a project on from the very beginning to the end, then Communities Renewables, Energy for All, Share Energy, they can all offer either some of that or maybe all of it. And then in terms of assets management, once you've got a community scheme up, there's Bright Renewables, Communities Renewables, Energy for All, they all do that. And I should declare not a conflict of interest, but an interest in that Bristol Energy Coop is one of the community groups that is an owner of Bright Renewables. And then fundraising platforms, FX Abundance, and a lot more. So those are all different organisations to support us all. Don't have an awful lot more to say, apart from really, I think we're on the cusp of something really special. You know, we are being approached by so many people now who want us to help, and we can't provide that help to everybody because we haven't got the resource. You know, and so that's why I bang on all the time about institutional investment, impact investment, working at a regional level, and just getting all these networks really properly working so that the money flows down to the very, very local level where we know we all need it. And that's it for me.
Great, thanks so much, Jess and Andy. Really interesting presentation, and yeah, great to see the impact you've been able to have over the past 10 years, and yeah, really handy to see some of those top tips, which I'm sure are helpful for lots of people on the call. I think particularly the one on avoiding burnout, which is what we've seen for a lot of community groups, and I think all the more impressive that you've managed to avoid that while taking on a hydro project, because I know that can be one of the most arduous things to take on. But we do have a few minutes now if anyone has any questions for Jess or Andy on any of that. If you just want to raise your hand, then we can, yeah, I'm sure we can get to you. Yeah, Cara.
Thank you, always excellent to hear these great community projects. I have two questions actually. One is around, have we also been looking at energy efficiency actions to help reduce demand in order for it to be easier to deploy renewables for all our needs? And as part of that as well, what successful or unsuccessful engagement with the wider community of Bristol have you had? I mean, do they know, for example, how much of the energy on the local grid is being generated from your project?
Answer the second one first. No, they probably don't, but I'm very pleased that we've taken Jess on within the last sort of probably 3 months, so this is her full-time role, and it's all going to change. You know, we've just been so stretched that we haven't done all the almost like traditional comms stroke marketing work that we'd like to have done. With the first one, we are looking to do almost like it's a retrofit microgrid, I suppose. It's building on some work that we've been doing with, again, one of our partners, CPRO, at Eastern Community Centre, where there's a very integrated heat storage project. And what we want to do is extend that to the neighbouring streets and do retrofit at the same time. Again, it doesn't stack up financially by itself, but you know, we're just applied for various grants to help make it work. And if those don't come off, then again, we need to find more supportive organisations who see it as a really key thing to do, who will put their money in, knowing that it's not going to provide a big financial return.
Great, thanks Andy and Cara. Dan, you were next.
Yeah, just with the battery storage projects, Andy or Jess, I guess that some of the money, the income from that is going to come from the householders that could buy that power in the evening. But are there any other sort of like grid income streams that you're expecting to get from the battery storage projects? The reason I ask is we're going to be installing a 50 kilowatt battery locally here. Yeah, and we're just not quite sure what the income streams are.
Yes, so we have got a 100 kilowatt battery that we installed a few years ago that was actually meant to be almost like our first microgrid project, but it suffered a little bit from not getting all the grant funding, so it's ended up being a standalone battery, and that is being used to bid into grid balancing services. So it's with an aggregator who includes our battery in a much bigger portfolio, and it's been very good learning. Except just in the last few months, they've decided that now we are too small to be included in their portfolio, so it's quite tricky. It's a bit of a parallel between almost like, when you do your first solar rooftop projects, the cost of the legals, just in proportion to the size of the project, are massive when the legals for a big solar farm are about the same cost. And so to do a small size scheme now, if you were trying to go for grid balancing services, it'd be quite tricky to do. There are some interesting organizations out there who are very community focused, but I think they're working up like offers that may work for us, but they're not quite there yet. So it's very, very fluid.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think that's something we've seen as well, that the relative cost of doing small size schemes make it more compelling to just go for larger schemes straight away. But Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, I noticed you mentioned on a couple of the slides about heating as well as the power generation. I think it was heat pumps mentioned. Has any of that been done at a community level, so you've got some economy or organization of scale, as opposed to just houses have put heat pumps on individually?
Yeah, so that's how the microgrids are working. So well, yeah, so each house does have its own heat pump, but the whole system of almost like allocating electricity to the different appliances in each house across the whole microgrid is run by sort of the smart software behind the scenes. So typically in a nice sunny day, the site will be generating more electricity than it needs, so that can be stored for later use or on the battery. And at times the battery may choose to almost like discharge that electricity back in the evening, or potentially it could be being used for sort of grid balancing services, etc. So it's all very, very integrated, and yeah, it's going to be really interesting in the next couple of years once it's actually in place, as sort of the whole system is tweaked, because it will need to be tweaked, and as the whole policy changes around us, as it is continuing and will continue to do so. This will be fascinating to see if it does really do what we hope it will do. I think it's not really a technology thing right now. I think it's all the other systems that go around it. It's dealing with the householders and making sure that if they actually don't want to be part of this, that they can use another supplier, and fitting in with all the.
And is that just feasible if it's a new build set of houses, or in theory could you do that if all the houses are existing but on private land, or is it new build only, do you think?
I think it's harder with retrofits, and this is where the grant side of things has to come in. I mean, on this scheme that we are looking to do, that sort of the houses around Easton Community Centre, the idea is that they would all the different sort of MPANs in each house would be aggregated into one virtual MPAN from that aggregation point of view. But it needs the big providers to come in and do this with us as a pilot project. And we are in discussions, and it's slowly happening. But yeah, I think retrofit on the whole is so much more difficult to do financially than new build.
Thanks.
Great, thanks Andy and Jess. Tim, if I could just ask you to pop your question in the chat, just in the interest of time, that would be great. But yeah, thanks again so much to Jess and Andy for that great presentation. And now we move on to our final presentation of the day, and we've got Mark Mears, who's the Green Recovery Project Manager from WPD, who's going to talk about their plans for network reinforcement in the next business planning period, the Green Recovery Scheme and DFES. And in the interest of also not using too many acronyms that may be unfamiliar to people, Mark, if I could just ask you to as you're going through, define what RIO, ED2 and DFES and other such things are, please. But yeah, over to you, Mark.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Kai. Yeah, so DFES is distribution future energy scenarios. So they're the kind of things that we use, coupled with stakeholder engagements, to try and predict where the investment's required, and what we're going to be looking at the future. So from the graph on the left-hand side there, you can see that the actual domestic, non-domestic loads increase slightly due to various household items now becoming electrified, but there's a sharp rise in electric vehicles and electric heating. Also on the right-hand side there, you can see from our generation supply that into 2050, it's heavily in the renewables. So we're looking to get a lot of renewable energy rather than our other types. Next slide, please. So our network investment for ED1 is the top bar and ED2. So these are our price reviews. So ED1 is coming to a close end of March this year. End of March 2023. So we've got one year left for it. And you can see up to total up to 2020 is 10.5 gigawatts of renewables connected to our network. And by 2028 there'll be 14.5. But the significant increases for the demand. So it's the EV charging and the heat pumps. You can see that there's significant increase up to 2028, which is which would be the end of the RIO ED2 price review. So our plan is in. It's currently going through the processes with Ofgem, all to be confirmed hopefully by the end of this year, by Q3, Q4 this year. Yeah, so if I can have the next slide, please. So the DFES methodology, it's a simple but very complicated process. So we look at our scenarios. We engage with stakeholders every year. So whether it's local authority or anybody, I'm sure you guys have been to some of them. We then look at the scenarios, and we've got teams that do all this. And then we put it into a system, and we sort of say, right, this is where we're predicting to be in the future years on a year-by-year basis. So as you can see there, the baseline, so the data is collected from what we've got already. We then look at the sites that we may connect in the near term, and we look at our load growth over the shorter term. Then, like I said, engage with the stakeholders so that we can get information from you guys to sort of say, right, we're interested in these projects. And then we predict then where we're going with that energy. We have next slide, please. So all of this information can be found on our website. So you've got the feedback, you've got the data for the hub, which you can see all of where we're predicting the growth. It's all assumptions, and it's methodology that our strategy team uses, which is quite handy. Next slide, please. All of these slides will be provided, so you can go through them slower anyway. So we've also got a mechanism for managing uncertainty. So it's very hard to predict the speed of everything that's coming onto the network. So our best view at the moment is £1 billion of investment required. But we have got an uncertainty mechanism that allows us to be flexible within our price control period with Ofgem. And if passed, then we could potentially, dependent on what projects are required and how much investment's needed into the network, to go up to that 2.2 billion stage of investment. So that's the reinforcement aspect of WPD at the moment. We're in a very awkward time for reinforcement. As Paul alluded to, there's potentially the change in the regulations, and also we're in the middle of our Rio ED2 business plan going through approval with Ofgem. So it's a bit uncertain at the moment, but we're getting there. So if I can have the next slide, please. So on to green recovery. This is a separate project for reinforcement. So this is all about trying to recover from the pandemic. So we're investing £60 million into the network over the next 2 years. So we're helping, we're trying to help provide infrastructure into places that are hard to reach, or where we've had identified areas of interest for low carbon technology, where we've had restrictions in the past. We've got extensive engagement for a call for evidence in February and March in 2021. We had over 200 responses, and that helped us provide prioritizing areas for investment, and the investment unlocks additional capacity in those areas to help third party and where the third party interest was. And any additional capacity is there for any customer. It's not just there for the 200 responses. So I would advise you to go to our website, have a look at green recovery. So if you can, next slide, please. So the way we made our investment decisions, so we made sure that we had 3 key criteria. So it's how quickly could we complete the infrastructure and the solutions. So how quickly could we build it? How much of a network restraint was there, and how much could be utilized? So we wanted best value for money, and how many customers could benefit from green recovery assets. And then, like I said, value for money. So the scheme cost to the amount of capacity that will be released was also brought into it. So we included in a lot of the schemes is motorway service areas. They tended to be in the middle of nowhere, which is very difficult for us as a network operator, and there's significant amount of energy required at the motorway service areas at the moment, just due to the car charging infrastructure. We're also doing primary and larger substations, so 132 substation works. We're doing upgrades on circuits at all voltage levels, so 132, 33 and 11 kV. And we're also doing the smaller community stuff as well. So we're upgrading the smaller substations, 11,000 to 400 to LV voltage levels. So they're the works that we're doing under green recovery. Next slide, please. So a couple of examples. So in Mid Wales, we're doing multiple 11 kV network investments. It's such a rural network in Mid Wales. There's areas of outstanding national beauty, and a lot of infrastructure is going to be required in the future for car chargers and especially heating and things up there because of oil. So yeah, we're investing a lot of money up there. Truro is another project that we've got. So we're replacing the 132 to 33 grid transformers. So that boosts network resilience, and it provides extra demand for generation capacity. And it proposed new garden village in that area, as well as areas that without gas or electric source heating. So again, getting rid of the oil. Next slide, please. In Gloucester, we're doing an extension, 2 new cables from Tuffley primary substation, and it goes towards Gloucester services on the M4. But as I've already stated, it's open to anybody. So if anybody wants to apply, they can use this infrastructure. It creates, like I said, an anchor node. And we're also installing, the proposal is to install a new 33 to 11 primary substation in the centre of Nottingham city centre. That was through stakeholder engagement and the call for evidence. And that will facilitate demand and generation connections in the city itself to try and get down to net zero. So all of this information can be found on WPD's website under Green Recovery. There's an interactive map which you can look at, and you can actually click on the pins and it'll tell you the project that's going ahead. But if you want any more information, then feel free to get in touch with us at Western Power, and we'll go through those. I think that's the end of the slides, I believe. Yeah, there you go. So have anybody any questions on reinforcement or green recovery?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Really useful to hear about that. I think we've got a few hands raised. So yeah, I'll go to Tim first.
Hello, Mark. Thanks a lot for that. And it's great to kind of see the, at the scale of the levels of reinforcement that are going on. And I guess it's almost a sort of comment. It feels like when I'm involved in these stakeholder meetings and with work actually with SSEN, looking in that region as well, it feels like the story has been painted that the reinforcement is going to allow us to kind of get to net zero and allow communities to actually achieve this. What it feels like is a disconnect with reality on the ground. So in the local energy examples we had earlier, there were several projects that were talking about grid constraints about what we're doing now. And certainly in Northern Low Carbon, as Faithful knows, we're talking about only a 4 megawatt solar. The community is 2,500 people in surrounding areas. We've been working in the area for 10 years. It's not like we've suddenly popped out of the woodwork from yesterday, and yet we can't sort of connect anything, 4 megawatt scale solar, which is tiny really, and we want to put up wind, we can't do that. Had examples, Dan's talking about some of the connection stuff that add to the Oil Tower in terms of adding solar onto the wind. But again, to be clear, this is not just about WPD. If I look at SSEN, we're talking about putting 30 homes with PV and batteries in Osney Island. So 10% of the 300 houses, that potentially is going to pop the substation. We've got connections low carbon hub where we've got megawatt scale, but we can't actually connect till 2028. I just wonder whether there needs to be more of a recognition from all of us that actually we've got a real issue in getting to net zero. It's not that you're not doing stuff, it's not that SSEN's not doing stuff, but actually, when I look at the presentations, I kind of feel there isn't an issue. But actually on the ground, whenever you try to do a project, grid capacity is absolutely stopping us even starting to make progress to net zero, is what it feels like on the ground. So it's not criticism of you specifically, definitely, to be clear. It's more, I wonder whether as a collectively, nationally, and it's SSEN and WPD, recognizing that this is a really much bigger issue than is visible to people if we're going to get to net zero. Because when you're trying to do stuff on the ground, there's always blocks about getting connection.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Tim, and something I know we've been banging the drum on that for a number of years, hoping that some sort of change in the charging arrangements from Ofgem can solve that. I don't know, Mark, did you want to just pick up on that at all?
Just one positive thing to add on that might help actually in terms of is that's partly why in the earlier local the one I talked about is there more to be done around the modelling, so that the recognition that local balancing can actually unlock it to go alongside reinforcement. So whether those two to come together. Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Yeah, but from a design point of view, I think we are changing the way that we're designing. Certainly, we've got different design tools, which will help us design the network in a more efficient way. And again, it was said in the local group that you was in, it's sort of confidence, isn't it? It's getting that confidence in that the technology is going to work. So I think as we go through this process, there's going to be more tech. So I think we will get there. It's going to be a long process, but I think we will get there.
And maybe just to add on,
my connections seems to be going.
And I think just to add on what Mark is saying there is also the question of, do you do reinforcement ahead of need or not? Because if you think about the way we operate, obviously we just have a pot of money that we can use at a time. But it is whether, I think from what you're saying, we keep on investing in the network, even if there's not perceived need, there's not perceived immediate need, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, thanks, Faithful. And I think that sort of speaks to another few questions in the chat as well, why it's so important to engage with local authorities and communities that have got these net zero plans, so you can take a sort of longer term view on where that need and more generation projects might be coming online. I think there was another question in the chat that we had from Will. Perhaps if you could just pick up on this, Mark. Whether all of WPD's planned reinforcements are shown on the green recovery map, and whether there's timescales on these.
A green recovery reinforcement is, all of the schemes should be highlighted on there, but if you've got any doubts or if you've got any specific areas you want to look at, then contact the local planner and they should be aware of the green recovery project being completed in that area. As far as timescales are concerned, we haven't at the moment got detailed timescales for all of the plans, all of the projects, but the timescale for green recovery is the end of ED1 price review, apart from a couple of projects that are larger, so they will spill over into 2024. But majority of those projects, I would say 90% of the green recovery projects will be completed by March 2023.
Right.
Thanks, Mark. Cara, you have a question.
I have so many. But in terms of how reactive are you to changes in demand? So, for example, with Brexit and the crisis in Ukraine, which is completely separate, I'm not going to be Johnson on that. And suddenly there's been quite a huge uptake of people switching to electric vehicles because of price costs. So are you reacting to that in your predictions of that kind of demand and mapping to be able to deliver that work? And again, is it how proactive are you actually reaching out and engaging with local community energy groups, or are you still relying on local authorities and local energy groups to get in touch with you demanding for support? I'm just concerned that there's lots of work going on and a lot of projects that are being pushed back because there just isn't the capacity on the ground with WPD to actually be able to deliver some of those connection requirements. And it just feels to me that you and other DNOs could well be getting overwhelmed. And is there a strategy in which to bring more workforce online to speed up the process? Does any of that make sense?
It makes complete sense. We do engage with a lot of people, whether it's the local authorities and stakeholder engagement groups that we've had. So it's large generation customers. We hold stakeholder events all the time, so we get information from all of those. There's also other parcels of work that are being done for EV car charging, for example. So predictions up to 2050 on the demand at different areas, so motorway service areas and things. So all of these get put into the big pot that we try and design our network for in the future. But as far as staff on the ground, that wouldn't be anything that I would know about, unfortunately.
I guess my point is related to experience happening right now, where trying to put in an EV charging network, and it's very difficult to get WPD to actually come forward with dates to start helping support that connection. So it could be pushing projects back 3-4 months.
Yeah, in terms of, I just mentioned, in terms of our ED2 plans, a lot of that business plan and the general reinforcement works that have been included and submitted to Ofgem, they've all been driven by those DFES scenarios, and those DFES scenarios have been built up by us proactively contacting councils. So maybe not community energy groups, but certainly the councils have been contacted and they've been asked in terms of how many EV chargers they expect to connect in the future, how many additional houses are going to be looked to be connected, how much the heating in the area is going to change from potentially gas or oil across to electric, and that has formed the basis of our ED2 general reinforcement plans. And if you read the plan, you'll notice a lot of it is based on EV chargers and heat pumps, and how many of those we're going to have to connect to the network. In some cases, we haven't had detailed responses from local councils, and that's proved an issue, because that's caused as to include, I suppose, our own estimates. And that's in some areas of South Wales, for example, we haven't had that feedback coming back to us. And then we've had to get involved, really, because there's areas which we know are going to have EV chargers in cities. We know there's going to be potentially rapid growth from those low carbon technologies. So a lot of it has been sometimes related to feedback from councils, but we've certainly been writing to those councils and asking them for feedback. I noticed one of the questions in the chat was about, do we read the local development plans for the councils and do we react to them, or do we wait for the applications to come in? I think in the past we would read those LDPs, but ultimately we can't reinforce ahead of need. So we've always had to read them, conduct sort of informal strategy of our network, but we've had to wait for those applications to come in, because we can only really carry out connection works or reinforcement works in some cases based on the applications that we receive. Things are changing going into ED2, and I think we want to be more of an enabler of connection of these low carbon technologies, and that's why we've got so much DFES data trying to sort of justify this reinforcement to Ofgem, the regulator. So as Mark has alluded to, there's a huge number of EV chargers looking to connect to the network, and we've got a lot of general reinforcement plans to try and accommodate those, really.
Yeah, and I guess on the back of that as well is how would you then, because you're going to have huge demand all coming at one time, how do you prioritize those? And is it more about, can you change it to be more ethical around supporting communities? It just made my heart sink going, oh, we're Gloucestershire and the motorway services, and I thought, oh great, just okay, it's good because you're trying to support cars getting off fossil fuels, but actually when community energy projects can't go forward, for me, I would say that was more of a priority area to work on than motorway service stations.
Yeah, I think in my heart, I definitely agree with that. But we do have license conditions that we do have to comply with. And I think it's something that Kai mentioned, that the element of discrimination is something that we can't really breach. Really, we are, I suppose, always working on the basis that we treat everyone the same, regardless of whether you are, a big six, company, or whether you're a small individual. And I appreciate that's why community teams have felt disadvantaged in the past in some ways, because you aren't getting maybe sort of slightly different treatment. And that's why Faithful, I think, is going to be trying to work, trying to engage, and trying and help out in that respect. And obviously, I think Regen are working in terms of Ofgem to try and I suppose give some additional guidance. But what you can do in some ways is how things are managed at the moment is first come, first serve. So what you do have the advantage of is trying to get applications in early, while some of the larger firms can sometimes take time to make decisions. Maybe, I know it's a small benefit, you can sometimes maybe be a bit more nimble in terms of getting that application in the queue. Once it's in the queue, you are treated in that queue order the same as anybody else. So that's the only thing we can offer at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think that.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one point, Kai, recognizing that connection can always be an issue. WPD will facilitate any application the best it can. So in the ED2 plan that we've got, and even the way we've always operated, we have included innovation as a concept that we can use to enable some connections to go ahead, meaning that we are looking at how can we operate our network smarter and so on.
I think it's also worth just touching on the significant code review which Ofgem are going through at the moment, and I think the revised magnitude decision is due by the end of this month, and that does change the charging boundary for reinforcement. So any demand connection going forward, I don't think it applies to domestic customers. So it's only customers that have CT metering effectively. So it's anyone with an import capacity above 69 kVA, for example. So it's any, I suppose, free-phase customer above a certain capacity. But at the moment, for demand, they're looking at removing reinforcement charges completely. So you'd still pay for sole use assets. So you'd still pay for your connection to the network, but any upstream reinforcement then is going to be funded, I suppose, by the wider bill payers or some other mechanism. So it's effectively socializing those connection charges, reinforcement charges, I should say. For generation, it is going, the reinforcement charges are going to remain at the same voltage level, but they won't apply for the voltage level above where you're connecting at. So that I see this as a enormous change to the charging regime for network operators. The idea behind this from Ofgem is to remove all those barriers to decarbonisation. I think then you probably go to the issue then, which I think Tim has alluded to, is can we, hit net zero if we've got all these delays? That is going to be the big challenge, I think, is in terms of, okay, if we remove the charging element, you're just left with the timescales then. And that is going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about that, if we're going to have to reinforce networks. But we are talking about major changes to distribution networks. So, there is going to be a timescale element. We're building out the network. The alternatives then are, I suppose, flexible services. They may be more in line in terms of trying to bridge the gap to making financial contributions to generators to turn up, large demands turning down. Also, there's the role of active network management. There's a almost waiting room until we can get you connected to the network on a firm access basis. So that I see as the big game changer, which is going to happen next year. If you do have an existing connection in flight, those rules won't apply. So you would then have to apply from the 1st of April 2023. So that's something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think really helpful points for people to think on there. I think particularly the ones on hopefully shallower connection costs. So it makes it easier for generation to connect to the network, and that's something we all want to see. But on some of the earlier points, I think it's definitely something we've been picking up with Ofgem on whether they could prioritise, for example, community-owned generation to connect to the network. So that's, we'd encourage anyone to engage with us on those issues. But we are at time now, so I don't want to take up any more of anyone's afternoon, and I'll let you go and all enjoy the sunshine. So it leaves it to me to just ask everyone if you could just fill in that feedback poll that's been launched. It should be on your screen there. I think there's only 18 of you that have responded so far. So please do give us your feedback on this session. It does help us plan for future sessions. And our next few community energy forums with WPD are going to be in person. So we'll hope to see you all at them in future. We're going to be doing one in person in each of their licensed areas over the summer. So we hope you can all join us then. I'd just like to thank again all of our speakers, Faithful, Paul, Mark, Mike, Jess and Andy, and our expert facilitators, Als, Kate, Adi and Mary as well. And just to thank you all for your input this afternoon, all for coming along, sharing your thoughts and participating. And we hope to see you all at our in-person event soon. Just keep an eye out for that. And yeah, go and enjoy the sunshine. Right, thanks a lot, everyone.
And thanks for your contribution too.
Thanks, Faithful.